Hey, this is Brad Block, host of The Physician's Guide to Doctoring. This is a personal and professional development podcast for physicians where we have experts on the show that try to teach us everything we should have been learning while we were memorizing Krebs cycle.
Welcome, everyone. I'm your host, Dr. Christine Goins, and today we are so thrilled to have Dr. Christopher Allen with us. Dr. Chris is a pediatric neurologist, sleep medicine specialist, and passionate advocate for quality sleep. He understands the unique challenges doctors face when it comes to getting restorative rest, from long shifts and mental overload to adjusting sleep schedules while traveling. Dr. Chris is here to help us unlock better sleep habits. Welcome, Dr. Chris.
Well, thank you for having me, and I'm just glad to be here.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. There are some studies that are showing over 40% of physicians experience chronic sleep deprivation. And I'm wondering, from your perspective, why is sleep so hard for doctors to prioritize, even when we understand its critical importance in health and being?
I'm glad you asked that question. And one of the things about sleep is that it sounds cliche, but it's cliche for a reason. Sleep is important. And a lot of people, the first thing that goes when you're trying to sacrifice something is sleep. Doctors, providers are not excluded from that. And unfortunately, if you think about the training for doctors and even when they're in medical school, even when you're in college, you think about that mindset, oh, I got to stay up so I can get all this information. And so you're already sacrificing sleep, even though there's studies to show that you get better retention when you get the recommended amount of sleep. Then you go over to med school. Now there's more information. And they're like, okay, let me stay up. Let me figure out what I need to do. Again, sleep is not being preserved. And with that being said, it's just embedded in our mind. And I came from when I was in residency and in fellowship, there's been moments where you would literally work in a hospital for 24 to 36 hours sometimes. And with that being said, you're chronically sleep deprived, doing a lot of like life-saving stuff. And so one thing I'm really glad about, I think it's getting more out there that like sleep is important. Sleep can affect you. Burnout is real. And one time in our medical profession, when you're getting burned out, you start going towards, okay, how much sleep can I not get? Which it's like you can't, same what grandma used to say, you can't burn the candle at both ends. You need to get that restorative sleep, and it's going to help with that. And unfortunately, a lot of my colleagues were not leaning onto that. And I have a lot of patients that are providers as well, where I have to remind them of that, even though they do know.
Absolutely. So it's really embedded into the culture of medicine and into our training to forego this critical piece of our health. And like you said, burnout is at an all-time high among
Sure.
physicians, and poor sleep is both a cause and a consequence. And so can you explain this connection and share any strategies that you help your doctor patients with in terms of breaking the cycle of burnout and sleep disruption?
A couple of things. One, I always tell them, give yourself grace. If something is not completed, something's not done, before you can help others, you got to help yourself. That's the first thing. Give yourself grace. We can work on to that. One of the things I tell people, like, Mr. Sandman wants his money. And how do you pin him? By sleeping. They literally call it sleep debt for a reason. So you got to pay him. And how you do that is by sleeping. And for adults, the normal amount of sleep is anywhere from 7 to 9 hours. Now, I will be honest and transparent. Are there nights where I'm not getting 7 hours of sleep? Of course. But with that being said, I'm aware of it. I give myself grace and try to continue to get to that point. So I tell them one thing. One, make sure you have a consistent wake time, even if you're not working. Because when you do, that's going to help you facilitate going to sleep at night. So that's possible. The second thing I tell them is that do the math, 7 hours, set that alarm clock about 15 minutes before to give you a reminder, okay, it's time to go to bed. And doctors come from many walks of life. They might live alone. And I had a long day's work. I just want to watch this game. You can watch the game, but not every single night. Or you might have parents just look, the kids are down. I know I'm supposed to go to bed in 30 minutes, but I'm going to watch this hour show. Watch that hour show, but not every single night. And so it's just giving yourself grace, giving yourself a reminder. And I even have them log like when they're going to bed to see if that's helpful for them to say, okay, this is what I need, and making those small changes. And then I always encourage them, if there's a reason why they can't fall asleep or they can't stay asleep, that's when they're talking to a sleep professional like myself.
Yeah. And so if they know there's an underlying cause, or maybe they don't have clarity on what that cause could be, but if they're putting in these parameters, they have their alarm of when to fall asleep, they know they're going to wake up at a consistent time. But if something is getting in the way of, that's when they should come to you.
Definitely. And even if they're falling asleep and they're waking up and they still feel like they're not rested, and it's, look, I heard this guy, sleep Dr. Chris, he told me to get 7 hours. I've been doing that for a straight month and I'm still tired. That's when you should also look, because there could be something happening when you are asleep.
That's really helpful. So, as you said, physicians often accumulate significant sleep debt due to long shifts, irregular schedules, things like that. Is it possible to recover from sleep debt if you've had it for, let's say, several months or even a year? Let's say your intern year, and now you're trying to recover your sleep debt. How do you do that, if so?
You can over time. One, give yourself grace, because again, when I tell people that, it almost feels like it's discouraging to them because they know they're not in that sweet spot between 7 and 9 hours. But what I tell them is just, look, for example, I have patients who will tell me, and even some doctors, look, all I need is 5 hours of sleep and I'm fine. I'll just catch up on the weekend. But they call it sleep debt. So say if you owe Mr. Sandman $7 every single day from Monday to Friday, and you're shortchanging him $2. So on the weekend, not only would you have to sleep that 7 hours, you would have to sleep an extra 10 hours to catch up. And nobody's sleeping for 17 hours. And so what you do over time will catch up. It won't be like 1-to-1. I can sleep like this for a full year, but over time, you're going to notice a difference. So for example, if you correct it and you're getting 7 hours, within the next like month or two, you're going to feel the difference with it because your body's getting that restorative sleep, and you're recharging your battery. It's funny, like we are really strong on making sure that our battery's 100%, but not our battery 100% for going to sleep. You'll wake up in the middle of the night and you like, you hear your phone like, whoa, this is at 50. Look, where that plug at? We got to do that for ourselves when it comes to recharging ourselves with sleep.
Okay. It sounds like part of that grace too is when you are in that space of catching up on the sleep is to give it time. So it might be months before we actually start to feel better after so much sleep debt.
No, definitely. If you've been like that, then yes. And like never a couple of months, and like you're saying, you're doing that and you're still noticing that you're still tired. The hardest part about my job, I have to talk to things about people when they're unconscious. So there could be something happening. So it's my job to make sure that it's not happening. And that's when you get like a sleep professional involved. It could be like a sleep disorder or something happening in your sleep that I would have to look into.
Thank you for that. So for doctors who, let's say, travel frequently, whether for conferences, vacations, because they live a nomadic lifestyle, sleep changes may extend beyond the workplace. So what's the biggest difference, if any, between managing sleep during shift work versus sleep during travel?
Yeah, so there's two avenues that are happening with that, because even with shift work, and it depends on when your shift is, because I have a lot of patients that have shift work disorder where they might be working the night shift, they work it 3 days in a row, but they still want to enjoy life during the daytime. And so they usually have that recovery day. And there's certain things that you can do to help along with that with shift work disorder. One, when you are working, it's funny, the easiest way is whatever your shift is, keep that when you're not working. But how possible is that for some people? I have some patients like, sure, I'm just a night owl when I'm working and I'm a night owl when I'm at home, and I'm okay sleeping during the daytime, because your body's going to naturally want to stay up with the sunlight during the daytime with that circadian rhythm. So you're fighting against what your body naturally wants to do. So that's the people that happen during nighttime. But there's some things you can do. You nap before your shift. when you're going to have a bad day after your shift, you go through that and then try to get back to that regular time where you go to bed. And you have to be very mindful of it and also make sure that you're intentional, especially like if you know that like it's towards the end of your shift. This is the only time where I will say that if you get like something like caffeine or something to help you stay up, even in our books, it's like they'll talk about that for that treatment. Outside of that, I'm like, no caffeine. But this part, but there's a systematic way that you do that to help along with that. And also systematically taking a nap and limiting your light because it's all about that circadian rhythm where your body's knowing when to go to bed and when to wake up. And that's a good transition into when people that are in the nomadic lifestyle or if they're traveling to one place and it's different from the time zone that you're at, your body will naturally accustom to it, but sometimes it takes time. And there's things you can do. So to answer that question, it depends on how far apart you are for how many hours. There are special apps to help you get your jet lag taken care of when you're going. But honestly, the rule of thumb is if you are so many hours apart from where you're at, that's how many days it will take for you to accustom to it. So for example, I love going to LA. So if I go to LA, I live in the Midwest, it's 3 hours. So it's funny when I get there, it might be like 9 p.m., but it's midnight there and I'm all tired. But then over time, you start to get accustomed to that because with the sun and your circadian rhythm, it will adjust to that. Then you're 3 hours behind and you're like, man, it is really late and I'm still home. So no matter how far apart hour-wise you are, you think about that in your head. And there's also other things you can do as far as with like adjustment to light or even some, and I usually have this with patients as far as like with taking melatonin to help if they know they're going to go somewhere and they know how far and what time you have to go take the medication, what time you should put yourself around light to help with that.
Okay. So I had not heard about this, but I'm glad that you are here with your expertise to help. Okay. So if I, for instance, am moving to Johannesburg, South Africa in January. So that's going to be 8 hours difference from where I am right now. So it might take me about 8 days to then adjust my.
Correct. And it's funny because usually when you get past that 8-hour mark, it'll take a little bit less because you're getting closer to where your body is getting trained to that rhythm. And so, so within a week, you get used to it normally. And then, there's special calculations of what you can do because you have to figure out, okay, what time do I wake up? And where should I go to bed? Where should I limit my light so I can get to that easier? And some people, even 4 days before, there's things you can do to ramp up to that to make it faster. But the good thing is that if there's nothing wrong with your sleep, it just takes a while to get through that. And many people do, because like you said, there's some of the stuff you haven't heard of and your body just got used to it anyway.
Right. Are there specific tools, apps, routines? What are some of those that you would suggest for minimizing?
You search and put in jet lag app. There are some that will come in there and give you some ideas for that.
Perfect.
Give me an idea for a new post.
Okay. Awesome. And also for doctors who are traveling, how can they really create an ideal sleep environment in unfamiliar settings, like in a hotel room or planes to really maintain restfulness?
To answer a question, short answer, the best you can. But the thing that I tell people to remember when you're trying to go to sleep, because there is when you're actually sleeping and then there's your sleep hygiene, things that you do when you're going to bed. So you got to make sure that your bedroom is cool, make sure it's dark, and also make sure it's quiet as much as you can. Now, that might not be as much like when you're in a plane. You can use sleep masks to block out that light. That's also helpful. And especially if you're in a hotel, and most of the hotels are good with blackout curtains to help along with that. So that's something that's helpful too. And even add a sleep mask to that as well and sleep cool. Now, if you're saying, look, sleep Dr. Cruz, I like my room high. If you're not having any problems falling asleep, then keep the heat. Okay. And the thing that I always tell people going with sleep hygiene is that the bedroom, boy, for 3 things, they all start with the letter S. If you are sick, if you're sleeping, I think we know what that third S is for. So if none of that's happening, you are not in bed. And so just remember that helps with the sleep hygiene to make sure that you're getting your quality sleep.
Absolutely. And I'm wondering if, because I have a lot of doctor clients who have this situation going on too when it comes to sleep and just rest in general is that they feel really guilty about sleeping and resting. They always feel like they should be doing something, helping people, helping their families. Like, how do you begin to help your patients and including your doctor patients think differently about sleep and rest so that they don't feel so guilty?
Before you can help others, you have to help yourself. You do. And I always tell people, like, to give grace. And that's the hard part about even being a doctor. You want to help. We have that helper's heart. Sometimes it can be the death of us sometimes. And so also just boundaries. You have to give yourself boundaries because the best you is the best for the patients. So if you want to help the patients, you have to tune out. You have to give yourself those boundaries. You have to make sure that you are resting because a better you is better for those patients. And I always tell myself this, I tell my office this, I tell my colleagues this. Medicine finds a way. It always finds a way. So if you're tuning out for a little bit and you're like, but what are the patients going to do? Medicine will find a way. You have to give yourself those boundaries because if not, you're going to burn yourself out. I always tell people that medicine will always tell you it wants more. It's going to tell you it wants more. So that is never ending. So you have to give those safe boundaries for it. And when they feel bad about it, because it's unfortunately our culture, you work hard, you work harder. Not even play hard. You work hard, work harder. If you're not moving, and you learn that through wisdom, because the older you get, the older I get, I'm realizing like, no, I can't work like that anymore. Sure, 5, 10 years ago, maybe I can work some time after hours, but now I'm like, okay, it's quitting time. I have the mantra, you work at work. And of course, you give yourself grace because there's some times where you're going to have to do things. But yeah, you just have to give yourself grace and give yourself boundaries as well.
Yeah. So the boundary is really sticking to that and making it a priority and a value that we actually implement. I feel like sometimes we have values that we don't necessarily live out, but this sounds like one that's so critical to ourselves and the work we do.
No, definitely. It is because it can. And I sound like a purist, but if you are not at your best self, then you're not the best for your patients. And I've seen that personally, where I'm like, I gotta do this and get it all together. Small differences make a change. Because say you have 4 buckets full and you're like, I'm gonna work on this bucket. And all of them are still rising. It's no, I gotta get to this bucket. And it's all of a sudden it's just going up and down. But just give yourself realistic goals. And the thing is, we expect ourselves to do superhuman things. Yes, we're doctors. Yes, we can do a lot of great things, but we are also human. And so I usually like try to shave off at the top. Is there still a lot going on? Yes, but I have those boundaries. And all of a sudden, okay, I'm swimming. And you have to do that. And you have to be real with yourself. And I'll give you transparency. Sometimes I feel like that too. I'm a sleep doctor and I might have to read some sleep studies. And my body capacity might have 8 for that day, but there might be 20 I have to read. And part of me was like, I'm going to sit down and read all these 20. Then after 8, my body's like, all right, we're great because that's what your body can do. But then after a time, you keep doing it and it works. And again, it's giving yourself grace and just knowing that putting yourself in the right position to make sure that you're doing the best that you can do and being honest with yourself.
Absolutely. And so whether we are talking about improving sleep during our shifts or we're improving sleep on the road, I'm just wondering, what's your vision for how doctors can sustain better sleep health over the long term, given the culture we have in medicine?
Again, what you do is give yourself that boundary and knowing when you're going to bed, making sure that you are one, waking up consistently. If your schedule changes, be understandable about that, but make sure you have a consistent wake time, being intentional on going to bed, keeping bed for what I said that bed is for. Those, just doing those sleep hygienes is going to help you out. And if you are doing those things, and the hard part is that a lot of people do these things, and it goes into another part where some people might have a sleep disorder. And so if you feel like you're doing what you're supposed to do and you're still not getting that result, then that's when you get a sleep professional involved. Also, talk to your bed partner. They're going to know more about your sleep than you ever will. They know if you are snoring. They know if you're not breathing in your sleep or if you're punching and fighting in your sleep, they're going to know that. So if you talk to your bed partner, that's going to be helpful as well.
Yeah. So getting that collateral information from our bed partner, that's really helpful. What would you say, is there anything else that you think is really important to share with doctors about sleep? Maybe something that we haven't discussed or.
I like beating this in over and over, but sleep is important. And it's to have that realization because in our profession, that's what's the first thing to go, us sacrificing that. So one, sleep is important. Two, give yourself grace. And three, if you are a doctor, talk to your patients because you would be surprised of how many people have problems with sleep and they won't admit it. Some will, a lot won't. But if you ask the question that like, hey, do you snore? Oh yeah, all the time. My wife won't let me stay in the same room with her. You can get the cascade. So always being helpful for yourself. That's going to be helpful for your patients as well. And I can go on and on about just making sure that they get quality sleep or get their sleep disorder treated. That's going to help other conditions or comorbidities. And so that's what I'm excited about. That's what gives me passion to do the job that I'm doing.
Sleep Dr. Chris, thank you so much for being here with us today. And for those wanting to learn more about and work with you, where can our listeners go?
All right. Social media, you can like and follow at Sleep Dr. Chris. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. I do a lot on Instagram, but then also Dr. Christopher Allen. You can look me up on LinkedIn. Also, you can type that in on YouTube, and I have a couple of videos on there. And I'm also the CEO and lead physician of Quality Sleep and Neurology. That's my own personal practice in Michigan. So if you go to www.qualitysleepandneurology.com, all that information will be on there as well. And I know it's a lot to type, but once you type it, it's in there forever in your history. So that's where you can find me. And then also you can Google me, Dr. Chris Allen, or put in Sleep Dr. Chris. It'll come up.
Beautiful. So you heard it. There are many ways to reach out to Sleep Dr. Chris. That will conclude today's episode of the Physician's Guide to Doctoring. Thank you so much for joining us. Until next time, be well and stay free.
Thanks for listening. So please share it or like it or comment on a social media post or write us a 5-star review. Thank us again for listening to the Physician's Guide to Doctoring.